Let's face it, there were lots of issues for North Carolina last season, but one of the biggest, Carolina's leading rebounder was almost Seth Trimble.
This is Tyler Hansbrough, and you're listening to Locked On Tar Heels.
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Happy Tuesday. It's May 6th, 2025. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade. You're joining me at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you so much for making this your first listener watch to get your Tuesday going the right way. Special shout out to all the everydayers who are here with us, all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, and our great Locked On Tar Heels insiders as well. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Check it out. Coming up on the show today, we're going to do a little bit of a look back. 6 weeks out from last season, I did a show where I did 6 burning questions for the 2024-25 season. Basically, my thinking was that the answers to these questions, as we learned those answers throughout the season, would help determine how successful or lack of success, unsuccessful, the season was going to be. It was going to help tell the story of the season. So what we're going to do is we're going to split that up over the next 2 days. Today, I will answer 3 of those questions. Tomorrow, we will answer the next 3. Going to be really interesting. Before we get into it, a couple things here. Number one, Joe Tipton reported on Monday that Carolina is not in the mix for USC transfer Des Claude. Fine by me. I was not excited about the potential of him anyway, so that's great. And then in terms of what those 3 questions we're going to answer today are, we're going to be looking at minutes per game for Ian Jackson and Drake Powell. We're going to be looking at Elliot Cadeau's combination of points and assists last season. And we're first going to start by talking about Carolina's leading rebounder this past year, which actually brings me to today's Tuesday trivia question. Been a minute. I have just not been Johnny on the spot with those, but we need to get back to it as the summer months come. All right. Today we're talking leading rebounder. Just thought that would be apropos for the first question we're going to do here. So here's Trivia Tuesday question. You ready? What was the lowest average rebounds per game for a Tar Heel to lead the team in rebounding for an entire season? Again, the lowest average rebounds per game to lead Carolina in rebounds for the season. So 3 parts to this one. Who was it? What season? And what was the average rebounds per game? The answer for that coming up. I'm actually going to answer it in this first segment because we're talking about rebounds. So let's dive right into it. So one of those 6 burning questions I asked is, who's going to be Carolina's leading rebounder? Here was why I wanted to attack or answer that question throughout the course of the season. The prior seasons, it was a no-brainer. It was going to be Armando Bacot over and over and over again. He had been Carolina's leading rebounder each of the last 4 seasons. So, but obviously he was not going to be Carolina's leading rebounder this year because he was no longer on the team. And so somebody else had to step up and do it. The problem was there was no obvious candidate for who that would be. You had Ven-Allen Lubin coming in, but he was an undersized big. You had Jae'lyn Washington. A lot of people were hoping he would step up and have a bigger impact. Could it be Jalen Withers? Would he get a lot of playing time? There was just no definitive answer. There was nobody like Armando that was like, well, clearly and obviously it's going to be him. Part of that was Carolina didn't land a big in the transfer portal. And had they done so, I think we would have assumed, yeah, it's going to be that dude, right? There was nothing like that. So one of the things I asked in answering this question was, will it turn out to be one guy who the vast majority of the season is your leading rebounder and is by far the leading average rebounder? Or would it be several different guys throughout the course of the season, typically like a leading scorer would be? Well, here's the wild thing about it. For a lot of this season, Seth Trimble was North Carolina's leading rebounder by average. I mean, it was just insane. A 6'3" guard who was in and out of the starting lineup, was the leading rebounder for the Tar Heels. And it's not like he was doing it by grabbing 8, 9, 10 boards a game. He was doing it with around 5 a game. And that was the problem. Is not only was one of your guards the leading rebounder for a lot of the season, it's not like he was going out, like you might have like a massive wing that's 6'6", 6'7", that just gets in and gobbles up rebounds. Somebody like that, for example. That wasn't what Seth was doing. Seth finishes the season averaging 5 rebounds a game. Now, he didn't end the season as Carolina's leading rebounder. That did end up being Ven-Allen Lubin, thanks to him really coming on down the stretch of the season. Not in the NCAA tournament, but the 5 games leading up to the NCAA tournament, Ven-Allen Lubin was the leading scorer in each one of those. And so he finishes averaging 5.5 rebounds a game to lead North Carolina. I went back and looked because I love a good research assignment. Oh man, that makes Isaac happy. The last time Carolina's leading rebounder for the season had an average that low was Jawad Williams in 2002-2003 season at 5.6. So you have to go all the way back there to find somebody even remotely close to this low leading the team. The last time the average leading rebounder was lower than Ven-Allen Lubin's 5.5, never in Carolina history has someone been lower. So if you're realizing it in real time, yes, this is the answer to the trivia question. Ven-Allen Lubin's 5.5 rebounds per game in the 2024-25 season is the lowest average rebounds per game to lead Carolina season long ever. This is the lowest it's ever been. And I guess you could look at a bright side of that and say, hey, we rebounded by committee. Way to go. I think you could also look at it and say, and we'll need to go back and look at how many games Carolina was out rebounded, for example. And I know rebounding is not everything, but it is part of how you either gain more possessions with an offensive rebound or re-get possession with finishing out a defensive possession with a rebound. Like, that matters. And if Carolina wasn't doing it at a usual rate, that is a problem. So Ven-Allen Lubin leads the way at 5.5, lowest average ever, followed closely by Seth Trimble at 5 rebounds a game. Seth Trimble at 6'3" was Carolina's second leading rebounder, which again, I guess you could find some kind of silver lining in there, like, hey, way to get your nose in there, Seth Trimble. But boy, it's got to be better. Now, part of the answer to that question, again, was, will it be one guy or will it be a multitude of players stepping up? Well, 8 different Tar Heels led Carolina in scoring for at least one game. Ven-Allen Lubin was, interestingly, the one with the most, which makes sense when he has the highest average. He led Carolina in rebounding in 13 of the 37 games they played last season. And again, it was Seth that was the second highest. Seth had 7 games of leading Carolina in rebounding. Third was Jae'lyn Withers, and from there down to Jalen Washington with 4. And I think that is part of the issue when we look back on what wrote the story of last season. The fact that Jalen Washington only led Carolina in rebounding 4 times is wildly concerning. Now, that concern and care is all done and gone because that season's over and Jalen Washington's out the door. But again, all of that is part of the narrative of last season and why Carolina wasn't more securely in the NCAA tournament than sneaking in the back door. So there you go. There's the answer to the first of our 6 burning questions from last season, that 6 weeks out thing. Now, moving on to the next one. Carolina's 2 key freshmen, Ian Jackson and Drake Powell, were both in the top 5 of minutes played for Carolina, but one of them finished the season going in the right direction and one of them finished the season going in the wrong direction. We'll look to answer that question in just a second. And we'll do that right after I tell you about FanDuel. The NBA playoffs, they are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot, maybe it's a breakout playoffs player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it so easy for you to stay in the game before tip-off, getting in some picks, or even live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. 2 NBA playoff games tonight, Tuesday. Cavs at home against the Pacers. Cavaliers are favored by 9. Same thing, Timberwolves favored at home over the Warriors by 7. If you want to get in on that action, maybe find the total or some same game parlays for that, and go check it all out at FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, awesome. It's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet, because if it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. So go ahead, make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. The next burning question from that 6 burning questions I want to get to that I asked ahead of last season was, how many minutes per game will Ian Jackson and Drake Powell play? There was this interesting dynamic where throughout the course of their high school careers, Ian Jackson had been the higher rated prospect for a long time. But then it kind of flipped at some places. Some places kept Ian the higher ranked recruit. Some places moved Drake into being the higher ranked recruit. And so there was always this curiosity for me of, where is each of these guys going to fit with the 24-25 Tar Heels? Whose skill set will whose skill set will be most beneficial to this team? Because different skill sets fit different teams different ways. Ian's skill set was clearly and obviously just an offensive dude. Not much to offer on the defensive end of the court. Some other offensive stuff to offer at times when, if you'll allow me, Ian wanted to be more engaged in those ways. Drake, on the other hand, just offered kind of a vast multitude of do a little bit of everything pretty well. And he did do a little bit of everything pretty well. So that said, it's like, which one of those is going to fit better with this team? And in this transfer portal era, it's kind of hard to know sometimes until the season gets going, right? And then it's like, oh, I see what this team is. I see where Ian Jackson's role is and is not. And I see where Drake Powell's role is and is not. And to be fair, it took Coach Davis a while into the season to really figure that out. Remember, when Seth went down with an injury, Ian went into the starting lineup. Eventually, and he was blowing up at that point. But eventually that started to wane and Carolina had to do something different. Drake Powell then was inserted into the starting lineup at the 3 because Jae'lyn Withers came in at the 4. Drake in his natural spot was the thing that made Carolina cook a little bit down the stretch last year. So let's get to these minutes per game conversations. As I said, both of these guys were top 5. Interestingly, they were numbers 4 and 5 in minutes played per game. Number 1, 2, and 3 on that list, as you would probably guess, were RJ, Seth, and Elliot. And what was interesting to me, I don't think that this would not have been my guess if I had answered my question preseason. That Drake Powell averaged more minutes per game than did Ian Jackson. Now, having seen the season play out, you probably would have guessed that. I'm just saying, if you had made this prediction prior to last season, I bet the vast majority of people would have guessed that Ian would have played more minutes last year than Drake. And it was close, but Drake won. He was 4th on the team in minutes per game with 25.6, while Ian was 5th at 23.8. So you had that whole kind of those 5 guards that, again, this is guards and wings, I guess, if you want to include Drake as a wing, that we talked about for so long. Like, these are your best 5, but how do you get them on the floor? And what Carolina ultimately discovered was that even though those were maybe the most talented 5 players, it wasn't the best group of 5. And eventually Carolina found their way to that. And that's what ended up making things really go with Elliot, RJ, Drake, Jae'lyn Withers, and Ven-Allen Lubin in the starting lineup, bringing Seth off the bench, bringing Jalen Washington off the bench as well. That's what really made things go so much better. But the question I was really curious about, and I asked this in that 6 burning questions episode, not just how many minutes do they end up averaging for the season, but how does it progress as the season goes along? Do they start out, as a lot of freshmen do, with not a ton of minutes played, and then that ultimately ramps up? What does that look like? Does it ramp up, but then they hit a freshman wall and it tails off toward the season? Well, that's where the big difference comes in, because their minutes per game were really close together when the season was all said and done. Drake led by 1.8 minutes per game average, But here's where things played out interestingly. Probably if just think back on last season and the impact these guys had. Ian's impact felt like it was pretty limited to the middle chunk of the season when Carolina, quite frankly, really needed his offense to step up because it was while RJ was still trying to kind of find his way, but hadn't found it yet, all of that kind of stuff. So I went and looked at their individual game logs. Carolina played 37 games last year, and I just filtered it by the most minutes they played and looked at game numbers. This is really intriguing to me. Drake Powell's top 10 games in terms of minutes played in order of most minutes played till, 10th most minutes played last season. Game number 37, 35. So two of the final 3 games of the season were 2 of Drake's most minutes played on the season. 37, 35. Third was game 16. Then game 32, 17, 7, 14, 28, 31, and 13. Meaning 5 of the 10 games in which Drake played the most minutes last season were in the final 10 games of the season. So he was really coming on, really being trusted late. And in fact, as I look back, one of those top 10 was game number 7. But outside of that, the rest of the other 9 were all game 13 or later, where Drake really, really took steps forward. And in fact, let's flip it with Drake. If you looked at the fewest minutes played for him in order from least played to most played, game number 11, 9, 4, 20, 1, 10, 36, 33, 2, and 18. Meaning that 6 of the 10 fewest minutes that Drake played were in the first 11 games of the season. And so it's kind of telling you something about Drake's progression. But let's flip it and look at Ian. Ian's top 10 in minutes played in order, same from most played to 10th most played, were game numbers 15, 13, 14, 20, 16, 18, 22, 22, 12, 17, 19. What you see there is that Ian's top 10 most minutes played games all came between games 12 and 22. All of them between games 12 and 22. So that means that it's game 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, skip 21, and game 22. All right smack dab in the middle, because after game 22, you got 15 more, and prior to game 12, you had 11. That's how math works, right? And so that's really intriguing that Ian made his biggest mark in terms of minutes played smack dab in the middle of the season. But his 10 lowest game or minutes played in an individual game, 7 of those 10 came in the final 10 games of the season. Literally the opposite of what Drake did. Fewest minutes played from Ian from fewest to 10th fewest. Game 37, game 35. That's in direct contrast to Drake, by the way, whose most minutes played were in game 37 and 35. Ian's fewest minutes were game 37 and 35. That's telling. 37, 35, 1, 30, 2, 25, 36, 34, 33, and 28. So 7 of the 10 were in the final 10 games of the season. 2 of them were in the first 2 games of the season. And so it's just really interesting. It makes sense with what we said about Ian's most minutes played being in the middle. So you really see a contrast in these 2 freshmen. Drake's minutes were ramping up as the season went on. Ian's were ramping down as the season wore on. And that's what we learned is that, and I don't blame the coaches on this. I think this is just guys develop at different rates. And it's also what pains me, the lack of where college athletics used to be. Because in a previous year, Ian Jackson would not have transferred to St. John's. He might have decided to stick around and grow in the things that caused him to go to the bench a lot more down the stretch of last season, be it defense, whatever it was. Whereas, Drake, maybe he stays in the draft, maybe he comes back. It seems, again, as we've been saying, that all signs point to him staying in the draft. But man, it'd be great to have either one of them back. And now you've got none of them back. Welcome to the transfer portal era with Ian. And so really interesting there on their minutes played, both of them. Again, fourth and fifth on the team in minutes per game, both of them 23 plus minutes per game. But Drake really came on at the end of the season while Ian was tapering off, shall we say it that way. Well, today's third and final question from those 6 burning questions has to do with Elliot Cadau's progression with points and assists. Could he make it a jump in both for the 24-25 season that would really help put Carolina in a good spot? We'll talk about that in just a second. Right after I tell you about Upwork, scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, in development, design, and more. Experts, by the way, who are ready to help take your business to the next level. What Upwork does is it gives businesses flexibility by connecting them, by connecting you with top freelance talent across multiple industries, things like IT, AI, web development, marketing. Maybe you're still trying to figure out AI for your company. Use Upwork to get somebody to help you figure it out. So whether you need an extra set of hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job, man, it's free and simple, and within a day, you can have multiple qualified candidates to choose from. So again, instead of hiring full-time, Upwork helps you find affordable top-tier freelancers to scale your business efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now to post your job for free. Again, Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Reminder, we're going to tackle the final 3 questions of those 6 burning questions on tomorrow's show. But today we wrap up by talking about Elliot Cadeau, who entered the transfer portal and wound up committing to Michigan. My question on this front was, can Elliot Cadeau average 15 to 20 combined points and assists? Basically, does Elliot's average points and average assists add up to something that's between 15 and 20? For some context, his freshman year, 2023-24, averaged 7.3 points and 4.1 assists. That was a combined total of 11.4. So my wondering of could he get to 15 to 20 is not that big of a leap. I mean, that's literally like you grow 2 points and 2 assists a game. You got it. Well, he did grow in both categories to the point that he snuck into the low end of my threshold that I set up. Again, 15 to 20. Last season, Elliot averaged 9.4 points a game and 0.2 assists. That's a grand total of 15.6. The range I had set was 15 to 20. I even said when I was listening back to that show, boy, I would love for that to be a lot closer to 20, but we'll take what we can get. And thankfully, I said that because Elliot winds up being on the very low end of that spectrum of 15 to 20. Now, what's great about that 15 to 6 is it was buoyed by much better shooting percentages than Elliot's freshman year. His field goal percentage went from 41.7 to 44.5. His twos went from 48.1 to 49.2. And the biggest and most important jump was that Elliot's three-pointers went from 18.9%. That is not good. All the way up this year to 33.7. Very respectable. Very, very respectable. And he grew in free throw percentage as well, 64.8 to 67.0. Here's the problem there, though. Your point guard is shooting under 70%. I hate that reality, but it is part of the reality. And Carolina had to balance, are we willing to put up with our attacking point guard finishing with or having a free throw percentage sub 70? If not, we need to get somebody else in there to do it. So I'm curious to see what kind of leaps Elliot can take there. But here is the bigger problem for me because if you just heard, Elliot combined points and assists was up over 15 last year. That seems like a great number, right? Yeah, absolutely. Growing, I expect him to take more strides in that area this year as well. But here's the problem. In setting up that number, it was the vacuum of points and assists. I didn't take into consideration the fact that Elliot's turnovers would actually go up. What I thought wasn't even a bold assumption. My assumption was that Elliot's turnovers would drop, even if slightly, just drop. As you know, you have the wisdom and the age of another year of college basketball, and you do all that. Well, instead, his turnovers per game went from 1.8 per game his freshman year to 3.1 this past year. Plain and simple, that was not good enough from Elliot. The decision-making wasn't there, and that was the issue. His turnover percentage his freshman year was 19%. It's like, all right, that's high, but it's still under 20, and you're supposed to be a high school senior, so we'll take it. We will take you finishing at 19% turnover rate. But that number has to go down. Could we get it to 17% turnover rate, 15% turnover rate, and just keep working on that? The problem is, it went literally in the opposite direction. It went from 19% turnover percentage for Elliot his freshman year to 25.6 this past year. I really hope for Dusty May and Michigan's sake that number plummets this upcoming season, unless Carolina has to play them for something. In that case, turn all the balls over, Elliot. And so I look at that and I'm like, yes, he achieved the threshold I was looking for with 15.6, but there were other issues at play. And to me, the biggest of those was the issue with the turnovers. Well, we do have 3 more questions we want to attack tomorrow, including some 3-point shooting for RJ Davis and how he would do with that. If you are new to the show, welcome in. We're so glad you're here. Make sure you take a second and subscribe on YouTube. Very simple. Boom. If you're watching, just hit that subscribe button down below there. That would be very helpful. If you haven't subscribed on audio too, sometimes you might not want to watch on YouTube. You might want to listen. Awesome. I'm listening to podcasts all the time in my car while I'm mowing, whatever it is that I'm doing, and you might want to sign up for it there as well. If you haven't joined the Locked On Tar Heels Discord, man, that is a place with over 500 Carolina fans in there hanging out, talking crazy Carolina stuff all day. It's a blast, and we'd love to have you as part of that family. Also, maybe you want to go deeper with this show. Maybe you want to see inside all of the stats and data that I've been referencing on this show. Great. When you join the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders, you get free access to a Google Drive that has all of my data on it. Charts, record books, stats, years worth of stuff that I've put together. You get free access to all of that when you join the Locked On Tar Heels Insiders. That link is also in the show notes. All right, guys, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. Can't wait to be back with you tomorrow. But until then, peace.